Let's start lying on our side with our shoulders stacked, our ribs stacked, and our hips stacked, heels underneath our tailbone. We'll do a clamshell up to the highest point we can keep our pelvis still, have a little pause, and then we'll lower down with control. You can do these with a band. You don't have to use the band if you would like. Each time you lift, you're going to get to your highest point where your pelvis stays still. So really think about that. That's your core working to keep your pelvis still as you lift your leg. Little pause. And then you're going to try and keep your glute working as you lower back down. So just come to a hover. Don't let it snap back down. Feel the control. You're going to lift up and stay at your highest point now. Pause at the top of each little pulse. So 1 inch up, 1 inch down, just small little controlled pulses, still feeling how your core is keeping your pelvis still. And then we'll do our teeter-totter. So an even bigger core challenge here. Pelvis stays still as your knee comes in or your leg comes into medial rotation and then turns back out to lateral. So just in and then turning back out. Upper body stays relaxed. You're still looking straight ahead, nice and quiet through that whole upper body as your leg is moving in and then turning out. Turn it in as much as you can and then back through lateral rotation. Now we'll reach toes from fingertips, reach way out overhead and then bend back in. Reaching fingertips from toes and then bend that leg back in lateral rotation. So you're keeping that bit of a turnout as you pull your leg back in. Notice my waistlines are still long. Nothing changes through there. Pelvis is staying still. You're reaching, having a little pause, and then you're pulling back in with control. Reach, have a little pause, and then pull back in with control. Each time you reach, feel that length through those waistlines, and then keep the length as you come back. Now let's just extend our leg out. We're going to do rainbow, so toes down to the front edge of your mat, and then toes down to the back edge of your mat. Make your rainbows as big or as wide as you can keep your pelvis still. So the wider your rainbows, the more you're challenging that core stability. Controlling the movement as you lift, controlling as you lower. Keeping those waistlines long, nice and still through those hips. Up and down, keep reaching, and then bend that leg back in. Straighten both legs out now. So toes away from the top of your head. Let's get that bottom inner thigh. So we're going to lift from that bottom inner thigh. Have a pause at the top of the movement and then slowly control back to your hover. Each time you're lifting, use your breath. So try exhaling to lift, have a pause, and then inhale, control back down. Keeping a light touch with that arm on the mat. You could even pop your hand on your hip if you feel stable. Lift and pause, and then control back down. Now let's scissor our legs. So if you have the band on, you can press into the tension. You don't need to though. It's about keeping those legs lifted, challenging that pelvic stability again, so your abs are working to keep your pelvis still as these legs move. You'll start to really feel those top obliques working. Scissoring those legs. And keep the reach. Now let's lift up an extra inch. So really reach those toes away from the top of your head. Lift, pause, and lower with control. Lift, pause, and lower with control. Really get that bottom leg up there. It's easy to forget about it and just move the top one. Get that bottom inner thigh lifting, legs together, and then lower all the way down. Whew. We will do the same on the other side. So heels underneath your sitting bones again. Remember your hips are stacked, ribs and shoulders are all stacked as well. Clamshell that top leg up to your highest point where you can keep your pelvis still and then slowly control back down. So get up to that highest point, have that pause, and then control back. Each time you lift your leg, pause, and then slowly lower back down. The idea is that top glute is working as you lift and it's still working as you lower. Your core is working the whole time, keeping you nice and still. We'll pulse up. So just those upward pulses, 1 inch up, little pause, 1 inch down. 1 inch up, pause, and 1 inch down. Feel those abs deepening each time you lift and then right into the teeter-totter. So that's medial rotation as your knee comes down, and then lateral rotation as your knee lifts, getting the full range of that femur in your hip socket. Turn it right in, and then right out. Pelvis stays nice and still. Controlling. And then let's reach fingertips from toes. Feel that length in your waistlines as you reach. Remember, your leg is turned out as you bend it back in. Reach fingertips from toes all the way, and then bend back in with control. Reaching. Keep those waistlines long as you pull back. Notice my bottom ribs are still lifted. Both waistlines stay long. This is made quite a bit harder with the band because your bottom leg wants to move with your top one, right? You got to keep that bottom glute working as well. Lengthen. Pull all the way in, and then let's reach that leg out. We'll do rainbows now. So toes down to the front edge of your mat, and then toes down to the back edge. As you're making those rainbows, your toes still reach, right? It doesn't matter how big your rainbow is. You want to keep that stability in your hips, keep those bottom ribs that bit lifted, toes reaching from the top of your head as you make that little rainbow shape. Bend your legs right in, take a breath, and then straighten them both out together. So now your bottom leg is the primary mover here, lifting from that bottom inner thigh. Have a pause, and then slowly control as you lower back down. So lift with the pause and control. So it doesn't matter how high your legs go here. You don't want to let your bottom ribs press down to lift your legs higher. We want to use that bottom inner thigh as the mover. Your abs are working to keep your body still without putting a ton of weight into that top arm. Let's scissor our legs so they'll stay that little bit lifted. Toes are reaching away from the top of our heads as we scissor. You can press into the tension, that doesn't matter. Controlling the movement. Don't press into the tension and then let your hips move around, right? Keep your pelvis still. That's the priority. Little scissors, and then stay with your bottom leg forward, just pulse up. Again, only lifting as high as you can keep your bottom ribs lifted. You'll really feel those top obliques there as you pulse up, and that bottom inner thigh. Legs together, and then lower all the way down. Then we'll come up to a 4-point kneel. So hands directly under your shoulders, knees right underneath your hips, neutral spine, top of your head reaches from your left toes here. Bend your left knee in and then reach it back out. Again, these can be done with or without the band. Each time you straighten that left leg, think of pressing into your right knee. So left knee reaches, right knee presses. Left leg reaches, right knee presses. That connects to your right obliques a little bit, keeping that core connection as you move. Now let's straighten our right arm out in front, and we'll open our leg and our arm 2 inches from our body. So just open out, little pause, and then come back to center. Really getting into those obliques. Still think about that long spine. The top of your head is still reaching from those left toes. Core keeping you nice and steady, and then stay in those angles 2 inches away from your midline as you lower arm and leg and lift. Remember, if you feel really unsteady, bend your arm in. Just have your hand down underneath you, forget about the arm, and then work your way up to adding the arm in. You want to stay as steady as you can. Lifting, abs deepening, and then lower. Now let's lower our right elbow down. So most of our weight is in our right forearm. You're going to bend that left knee, and it's going to come towards your left knee, and then you're going to reach back up. We can reach a little higher now because our upper body is down on this angle. So really kick up nice and high, and then bend in. The trick is keeping your left waistline long as you move your left leg. So don't let that left waistline crunch as your leg bends in. Reach and pulse, little inch up, little inch down, little inch up, and little inch down. As you're pulsing up, you're pressing into that right knee, and then all the way back for a little shell stretch before we come on to the other side. So knees again underneath your hips, hands under those shoulders, nice long spine, reach out through your right toes, and then just bend that leg back in. So as you straighten your right leg, press through the tension of the band if you're using it. And remember, press into that left knee. So that's your standing knee We need those left obliques to work to keep us steady. And notice how still my body stays as my leg moves. Imagine you have a cup of tea on the small of your back. You want to be able to keep it there as you're moving here. Just nice and controlled. We'll extend that left arm in front and then just open your arm and your leg away from your midline. You can't see my arm, but it's opening out a bit. And then back in. As you're moving here, again, you're keeping that cup of tea on the small of your back. You're not letting your hips move. You're not letting your shoulders move. Keep that pressure into your left knee for that extra bit of stability. Now let's lower and lift on that angle. So your left knee is still under your left hip, but your right leg and your right arm are 2 inches away from your midline. Lower and lift. Keeping those ribs hugging tight around your center. Each time you lift, deepen those abs, give a little extra press into your left knee, and then lower down onto your left elbow, your left forearm there, and then reach out through those right toes. So right knee comes in towards your right elbow and then all the way back. Right knee in and reach nice and long. Remember, you can go a little bit higher because you're down on this angle. Get that little lift under your right glute. Remember, you're still pressing into your left knee and your right waistline is not changing. Keep it long as you bend in and as you press out. Control that bend in. And then let's go straight out. Lift up that extra couple of inches. Notice there's an angle from the tips of my toes down to the top of my head. Keeping those ribs hugging tight around your center and then all the way back for a shell stretch.